can get started. Would you like to tell me a bit more about your background and what you do?
Sure. Are you able to hear me still?
Yes, I am speaking to you.
Okay.
Feel free to keep the question if you think it's anonymous, but usually I'm trying to keep it as close to the real life interview as possible. So if you feel like sharing that portion, that's okay. Or if you want to go straight to the system design interview, that's okay too. Your call.
Okay. I am. We actually connected last week. I did a system design mentors session with you, so I'm just back for a practice interview this time. So I work as an SRE, and I am looking to do I'm practicing interviews for like big companies. I'm targeting Airbnb. I have interviewed with them in a few weeks, so yeah, hoping to get some practice and feedback to be prepared.
Okay, awesome. I have a good question for you.
Okay.
All right. So let's get started.
Sure.
Yeah, I think I remember we spoke a couple last week. Okay. So all right. So today we will be designing an RSS Newsfeed. I will go over the description and then I will type down the key points and then we can start from there. So we are creating a news platform where the users can log in, pick their favorite news sources, and then get a customized news feed from those sources. As an example, you can take a look at this link, the RSS feed link, to familiarize yourself with what this looks like. This is the link. When you click on the link, you'll be able to see that you'll be able to see what RSS actually is, right? RSS aggregator actually is, and you will see such as like top stories, world, US, and all of that. So when you click on any of the individual URLs, you will see an XML page that is generated. So over here, just collapse most of the XML headings, so that way the essential parts over here are title, description, image, copyright, and different items. And each item is a news article. So keeping this in mind, we want to do the following. When the user logs in to the app, they can choose 10 news sites that they want to subscribe. And this is the first time. This is called the cold start. So once they do a cold start, they can subscribe to 10 different news sites. And once they select that, they should be able to see the news on their feed. And they're also able to edit the sites, that is, delete any of the existing sites that they have and add on a new one, but the limit is 10. So the challenge for you is to design a system where this is possible. Think about how we'd like to store the user choices, how we'd like to gather and show news from the RSS feed, and how we might handle tons of users doing this simultaneously. I think these portions, you can correlate it to Airbnb, the listings that we have, right? So maybe you can correlate to that, because this would be very similar to that.
Okay. So just trying to understand the question here. So we are trying to design the RSS feed, which is similar to the link that you shared. Is that correct?
The link that I shared is just to give you an example of what the RSS feed looks like, right? So,
Okay.
so that's an example of what RSS feed is. And when you are thinking of like designing it, we can discuss, right? Like, is it like what kind of application are we trying to design? Is it mobile based? Is it browser based, and so on and
Okay.
so
Okay. So the user, so there is an RSS feed URL that the user selects, and then they are selecting. So this can be like on a. Okay, is this like going to a point like on a browser or a mobile app or
I
tablet?
can yeah. So sorry, I didn't clarify that. So sorry, the reason why I shared that link is for you to understand what the structure of the RSS feed is, right? To see, okay, each RSS feed, it has a topic and it has images, it has a title and different items. So think of that as a model that you need to have, right? So that's what you're looking for. But you can think of designing something like, an Instagram, for example, where you have different people's posts, right? But instead of posts, um, you can think of it as a simple RSS feed where you have a Flipboard used to be an example. If you have used it, it is you subscribing to, news resources, and then you log on to Flipboard, you will see different kinds of news based on your interests. So that
Okay.
is that.
So mostly a mobile-based application. And so, yeah, like based on like taking the example of like an Instagram feed where the user logs in and then they choose like who to follow, or in this case, they will select like or subscribe to 10 different types of news topics.
Exactly.
And based on those topics, the news feed will be generated, and the news feed should look like should the news feed look like something like Instagram, or it should look like the RSS reader link that you shared, the CNN link?
So that we can discuss, right?
Okay.
So that we can discuss to see what that needs to look like. So that could be a discussion point for us.
Okay. Okay. And then user can also edit or delete any subscription, but they need to have at least 10 subscriptions. Okay.
Yeah. So I can clarify your question about what that link should look like. So if it's an application, right, we can't provide an XML file when they open an application, right? Because that is not humanly readable. So we want like the finished product where the news articles could just be headlines, or they could be the reason why I shared that the RSS. So when you click on the top stories link, for example, the copy URL to RSS reader link, you will see the different attributes that are there. So we will be rendering attributes, right? Like we will be rendering each of the items as something. Each item has associated link. It has a publishing date. It has a title. So we will be publishing the actual data on the UI and not the XML.
Okay. Okay. I think it makes sense now, like the question. Okay. Then I can gather some more information about about the usage of this application, right? So like So you mentioned that the users, it's probably going to be like a mobile application. And then are the users, okay, so are the users going to, okay, how many users, I guess, are we expecting to like use this application?
I think we can start off with maybe 100,000 users for now, and then later on, as you progress through the system design, we can talk about scalability.
Okay. And when we are designing the news feed, are we like ordering them in a certain way, like even within the 10 subscription, is there going to be like this 5 topics is like the user's favorite, whereas the other 5 topics are more like something the user is like passively interested in, some like, and is there some sort of ordering that we should consider when designing the news feed?
Yeah, that's a great point actually. So we want the latest news to come first, right? So this can also branch to a topic of its own, which is trending, right? Because if there is because if there's a breaking news, possibly all news channels would be posting about the same things. So we could get to that as well as to what is the content that we want to share. But definitely we want to organize it in a way that the latest news is always on top as we refresh.
Okay. Okay. And then is the user also going to be able to like share these news articles?
At this point, that's out of scope.
Okay. Okay. So are we also are we also going to design like how the user is going to log in, pick up the 10 subscription, or just the?
Yeah, I think you don't have to worry about the authentication part of it and the login part of it. I think just assume that things are already done for you, and you're either registering or either logging in directly. You don't have to worry about the underlying the authentication and registration.
So just focus on building the news feed from the subscriptions. Okay.
Correct.
Subscriptions. Okay. Okay. So I think regarding to like latency and like how often we want to update the news feed, is there a number that, or any ballpark that you had in mind?
Yeah. So when a person is already scrolling on the news feed, we can discuss what kind of scroll that we want to have. There are 2 different kinds, but whenever the user logs in for the first time, they will not see any of the older articles. They will see a completely new article. And how often that it is going to be refreshed, you can think of it that it refreshes every 3 to 5 seconds.
3 to 5 seconds. Okay, so the newsfeed refreshes every 3 to 5 seconds, but the first time they're logging in, the newsfeed should be refreshed already. Okay. And then and we okay, like any downtime that we should be, any leeway in downtime that we should be looking for, like basically availability of the application.
Yeah, so we definitely want to be highly available in this case. So, the 4 nines, 99.9999 will be highly available.
Okay.
So
okay,
if
so
you
high
persistence and availability, we will prioritize availability.
Okay. And the scalability will be discussed later. Okay.
Yeah. As we progress and we build our skeleton out, then we can, think about scalability and how do we, since specifically it's for SRE position, we can think about, performance and what can deteriorate and how do we add metrics and checkpoints and all of that.
Okay. 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 I think this is. I think this is like a good starting point. Is there anything else that I am missing that I should consider?
No, I think you got
okay.
got it. We can move on to functional requirements and
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like functional requirements wise, I think kind of we want like the news feed to be generated when the user logs in for the first time. And then after the user has spent some time on using or going through the news feed, the news feed should refresh every like 3 to 5 seconds. So newsfeed should auto refresh. And then
so if the user is in the middle of reading an article, we don't want to refresh it at that point and then make the user lose their article, right? So but if the user is maybe just scrolling, what kind of
I think in Instagram, like I know that when you're scrolling, like you're scrolling down and then you kind of want to refresh your feed, you scroll like all the way up and then you scroll down again and then it has that loading button and then it refreshes the feed for you.
Exactly.
So is that
exactly. Yeah. Push was push the updates or do we want like that the user pull the updates, right? So you can think about that.
Okay. Okay, so let me just rephrase them then. Newsfeed refresh periodically. And then, like we said, your push or pull method. And then when the user clicks on the news, it should load the title, the images, and other details related to the news. Okay. Clicking. Okay, actually, one more thing I forgot to ask. Should load the news details. So like text, images, URLs, etc. Is the user going to be able to like favorite any news? Is that something we should consider in this design?
We can build upon that as well.
Okay.
But that is for now. That is out of scope.
Okay. Okay, so newsfeed generation, newsfeed refresh, and then clicking on a news article. And then I think the non-functional requirements is like we want this system to be highly available.
Yeah, I think you've covered the non-functional requirements quite well.
Okay. So I think I'll just use that. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, then we can dig into like the API design for this application. So I'm thinking that given that we already have the user information and their subscription information, so let's say subscription ID, we need to build a news feed based on that. So the first thing I'm thinking is we need to use the subscription ID and get the news articles related to all the subscriptions. So we probably need something.
Sorry, but by subscription ID, you mean like the individual news, like CNN will be one subscription ID, BBC will be a subscription ID. Do you mean that? What is the subscription ID there?
Okay. So the subscription ID I was thinking is like the topics that they are subscribed, have subscribed, the 10 topics they subscribe to. So it can be like whatever, top news, sports, etc., like those kind of topics. And that will probably be like a JSON, which will have the subscription ID is what I was thinking.
Okay, I think so. The context of this question is that we won't be subscribing to individual topics because that could be like the next step. But for now, we would be subscribing to 10 news channels, right? Because if we choose topics, then the scope of the question changes drastically, right? Because where they aggregate all news channels across the whole world for a particular topic, right? Like if someone chooses sports, then we are not limiting it from any of the news resources. We're just choosing sports. So now that becomes a question, like a second layer of a question as to if someone chooses a topic, what will be the source of that topic, right? That expands the question to a very different direction. So we can assume that the user can only choose the news site. And whatever that news site is publishing, the user is able to see. There is no personalization at this stage, but we could add on personalization in the next stage. Like once you have your block diagram or something, then we can start thinking about different directions.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. So then in this case that I'm thinking the subscription ID would still be like the topics within that news channel. So like in this example in CNN, I see like there are the top news, top stories, world, US, etc. So whatever the user is the 10 topics that they are selecting at the time of registering to this application, it's saving them as like something like a JSON, which will have these 10 items, and then based on that, like we can get the articles from that. So once we have the topics, I guess, within for the user, then all we need to do is let's say get news articles for a user and for a given like I guess subscribed topic, and like a timestamp, I think, because we want to get the latest news at the top, and also we want the latest news. So it's always good to have like the latest articles when the user is requesting or when we are generating the feed. And then, so this should get the news articles from that RSS, the RSS URL, and then once we have that, we need to render the news. So like maybe we can do, so this will return the RSS URL, and then render. Oh, actually, before we render, I think need to order the news. Order the news articles. This will be like parsing the URLs and getting the news by the timestamp order. And this will return all the news in order. And then once we have the news in order, we can render the news feed, which will take like all our news in order. And then this will be what the user actually sees on their feed.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So this render underscore newsfeed, since we are associating the feed with each user, I think it would be good to have the user ID.
Oh, user ID, yeah. Yeah, so user ID and news will be rendered. Does this look, and then refresh. And then refresh newsfeed. This will basically be like, depending on the news model, the model that we're using, push or pull. This will basically have the user ID, and then it will basically do all this process again. Actually, we don't need another API. I think just whenever whenever the request is made, it will just go through these 3 APIs and render the news again, because it's going to be on demand.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because I think we can think of a cron job or something which is running in the background, right? Like when a person logs in, because we actually don't want to waste resources by constantly refreshing, because we want to wait for the user's action before we refresh a particular user ID.
Yeah. Does this look good so far?
Yeah.
Okay.
Could you talk a little bit about when the user is selecting the.
Oh yeah. I missed that part. So when the user selects news, we want to render the news article. So I guess render news article, and this will we will still want the user ID and then the news article. I think news article URL or ID, and this will be the text, the images, and what else is there? Oh, sorry, the media content, the link, and the title. So media content, link, title, and I think those are the most of the data that I see in the RSS.
So wouldn't the render news article, it looks very similar to the get news article, right? So can we not add in the article properties inside the get news article itself? Because the get news article for a particular user and a subscribed topic at a time stamp, you are returning the RSS URL. So wouldn't that like the question that I mean to ask is, the render news article, you're providing the response essentially inside that function as well. Whereas things like media content, like these will be the response for a particular function call, right?
Okay.
If for
Okay,
example,
I see.
When you call get news articles, you're going to pass in the logged in user ID and a subscribe topic and a timestamp. So this will be a request. So your response is probably going to be that user ID, the news article ID.
Okay. I see what you mean. Okay. Yeah, I think that makes more sense. Okay. Yeah.
So perhaps you can think about how will the user select their news feed. So we can discuss that.
So when they are selecting the news feed, it's loading these items on.
Select their the news channels. I think it'll just be like select news resource, and then there'll be a user ID, and then a list of news sites that they want to select. Right?
Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah. I see what you mean.
So
okay.
This will probably be like the step number 1.
Okay.
And then the other.
Okay. Yeah, I think this makes sense. So, okay.
We can move on to the blog diagram or assistant.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'm gonna switch to the toggle, the whiteboard. So let's see. Yeah, so so this is the user, like the client app. Okay. Wait 1 second. Okay. All right. Okay. Yeah. So then the user is. So yeah, we'll send a request basically through like a like a load balancer that will load balance the traffic between the backends. So this will be our main service. So we can call this the okay. So I think we will need one service that is one service that is collecting the feed, and the other service that is pushing the feed or generating the feed and giving it back to the user. So this will be service that only takes the user request.
Okay, so you had connected the load balancers to the app server, right? So that sounds like, and each app server will probably have its own APIs that you just shared.
Yeah. Let me just go back. Okay. Yeah, so let me copy the APIs again in the whiteboard. Oh. Okay. Yeah, so yeah, I'm thinking like the get news articles and order news articles will be one service, whereas rendering the news articles and the news feed will be like another service. So this is the news feed generator. Actually, okay.
So if you were to like take one step back to see the broader perspective, so all these different calls, right? To get news articles or order news articles, render news, select news, they all are basically API calls, right?
Mm-hmm.
So at system level design, we probably don't need to go into the details of the individual APIs, because I think you are focused on the system design overall, right? So we can simply term the boxes next to balancer as servers, which will possibly have all the other APIs.
Okay. 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 So this will be the RSS feed service, and for simplicity, we are this is servicing our APIs for now, and then basically we are also storing the user information and the subscribe topic in a database, so that will have the user. In this case, since we have like information mostly about the user ID and subscription, I'm gonna go with, I think, a relational database makes more sense, because currently we are only storing like this information. So I'm gonna go like something like a MySQL or a Postgres will be good to begin with, and then the RSS feed service is then going to generate like the news feed back into the client app. So here I'm thinking that the rendering of the news itself. Okay, yeah. Sorry. Before I go into that, like this is like a high level diagram. I was thinking, is there like something that you would want to go into before I like go into the point that I was trying to get to?
Yeah. So I actually wanted to go a little bit deeper into the database, right? So, I think here I want to ask you some SRE kind of questions. So over here, when you're doing the writes, right? Say that the user has selected their news sites and they're doing the writes onto the database. And for whatever reason, in the middle of a particular write, the database server comes down. How would you ensure that it is still highly available, and that will that write happen once the user, is in the middle of the process, or what other?
Yeah. Yeah, so usually in database, or especially like a relational database, it's good to have like a single source of a single source where you write and then replicate that to like other database for availability. So in this case, like I think it will be good to have like just like a master follower model where the feed service will write the data to the master, and then the data is replicated to the followers. And then another model that can be done is also like have like two masters, but one master be like the primary master and the other master be like a cold standby. So in that case, there would probably be in that case also, like if the primary master fails, then the secondary master will automatically take up the role of the primary. Usually in like a master or cold standby or a master follower design, the data gets replicated like within milliseconds. So that will ensure that the data is available. In the middle of, if the database dies in the middle of a write, then we can have like retries from the service itself. So usually when like the writes to the database fails, there is a or like a failure of acknowledgement back to the service. So the service knows that the data was not persisted to the database. And then usually in the service, usually the database setup is such that like let's say it's a master follower or master cold standby kind of a setup. The database usually has like a CNAME, and it has multiple IP addresses to that CNAME, and there is like a health check done, like maybe we can assume like some sort of proxy service in between the service and the databases. So that proxy service kind of does health checks of the databases on a per second cadence. So if the database fails, that proxy will remove that database IP address from the CNAME. So the next time the feed service retries, it will go to like the new master, to go to the new master, and it will persist the data.
Okay. All that sounds good. So for some follow-up questions from that, right? So you mentioned about the master database. So would the master database contain the values for, in this case, 100,000 users? Would we have one database for that?
I think 100,000 users is reasonable for a single master to handle, but definitely as we scale, like if you're talking about like millions of users, that needs to be scaled. So,
could you give me an example of how we could possibly scale? Since this article, this newsfeed becomes really popular, and we are quickly used to say 2 million, right? How would we scale that?
There are a few ways to tackle it. I think the first approach that we can take is do like horizontal sharding. So basically divide the database by like have some. So if there's like 100 million users or like 1 million users, let's say, so like maybe have half of them in one database and the other half in the second database. So we can like kind of split that way. or we chart the database like based on maybe like username, but I think that will lead to like unequal distribution of data in the databases. Yeah, another. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Finish your thought and then I'll ask you a question.
Yeah, the other way I was thinking is like do like yeah, have like a pool of databases, and they have like sort of a hashing algorithm so that when we are registering the users, based on the hash, the user is registered to that database, so basically have like a primary key and a hash, and based on the primary key, the hash will be, or the user hash will be registered to that database. So something like that.
Okay, so by using cryptographic hashing, we can select, the index database.
Yeah.
And okay, that sounds good. So you mentioned about the choice of the database being MySQL. So in MySQL, it is like a text-based data, right? We can't store, the images and all of that inside MySQL. We can only, I guess, we can only, add links to that image, but we can't store the image itself, or any like article has a video or any other data, we can't store that. So would there be a better way of storing that information for the article?
Yeah, so for storing images and videos, it will be better to have like some sort of like a blob storage, something like S3 that will where we will actually store the files, and the database will have like a column that will have the S3 link to that image or that video. So that way we are not storing, we are conserving storage, or we are not storing that information in the database.
Okay,
yeah, I think
that sounds good. So you also mentioned that the database will probably have some sort of a control panel where they keep referencing their like if they're currently up or if they're currently available, and in case of any of the databases goes down, there's also happening in the background, and then automatically the secondary databases be referenced, right? I'm just recapping to ensure that I got your point. Okay. Could you tell me a little bit about, say that there is breaking news, right? So one particular news channel gets a lot of like attention, and say that, like 70% of the people are now suddenly interested on this one particular news, right? So how will you handle a sudden influx from a particular news site?
And okay, so this news, the interest in a news will like be a periodic spike, right? It's not something that is happening like continuously.
Yeah, it'll just be like it won't be periodic. It'll just be like a spike that comes in. We can't predict. At that point, the resources available, and you want to make sure that that still is available and easy to access. So how would we reduce? What would we do?
Yeah, I think in something like a situation like that, it will be helpful to have like some sort of caching system here, some sort of cache between the client and the RSS feed service, which will basically get updated based on like the topics that are trending. So that way the users don't have to go through this service every time, but it can just directly get the data from the cache. So one second.
Will the client have direct to the cache, or would this cache be better suited between the RSS feed and the database? Because like, what kind of cache are we thinking? Are we thinking, cache aside, cache right through? What kind of cache are we thinking?
Sorry, please complete your question.
Yeah. So for the cache, is this the right place for us to place cache between the client app directly and because the load balancer is being skipped, right? Like once the client is talking to the cache, the load balancer basically has that influx of traffic, and then there might be multiple uses of RSS feed service, not just one, right? So the load balancer is helping with that. So could there be a better place where the cache could be placed?
Yeah, so the cache can be like in between the load balancer and the RSS feed. So let me move this here. Yeah. So basically the idea behind the cache here is it will already have the images and the videos of the news articles loaded that will be quickly rendered on the client newsfeed. So that will reduce the queries we don't have to query the database that often. And the cache will be updated based on basically it will be like a what is it called, right ahead. I think basically it will be written to the database first, and then the cache will be updated. And then as the user request increases for a same article, the request will just be served from the cache. And then if for the eviction policy in the cache itself, we can use something like least frequently used or least recently used. And then based on that, we can evict news articles which are not trending at that moment.
Okay, so assume that the client does a get article, the get news article call, right? Because it clicks on a particular article, and now they want to open up the article. So now the get news article call is being initiated. So when the client app calls that API, directly goes from the load balancer to the cache, but the call is being intercepted in between, to the cache instead of it reaching the RSS feed in this case, right? So wouldn't the cache be better placed between the RSS feed service and the database? That way, we want to wait for what call is coming through. So based on that, we are able to get the value from the cache, because at this point, when the client is requesting something from the UI, before the call is being made to the database where we are intercepting. So at that point, we don't know what API call, is actually being used between.
Okay. Uh,
Because
hmm.
the load balancer, all it is doing is that it is redirecting the client app to different
Yeah.
API servers, so that it doesn't like die. So then
Mm-hmm.
all the load balancer is doing, it is just redirecting traffic. At that point, it doesn't know exactly what API call is being called or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is
Yeah.
distributing. So at this point, like if we are looking into the cache, we will not know what exactly should be fetched from the cache, right?
Um, so I'm thinking there are like two aspects here, I guess, in the case of cache. So the cache in between the RSS feed and the database will be more about getting the article based on the subscribed topic, whereas the cache here between the RSS feed and the app is going to be more for the videos and the larger files, basically, so that we don't have to pull that every time from the storage. Actually, there should be a link here too. So yeah, so I guess like this cache is more for the once when the user selects the news, like how that page will look, and then the cache here can be for when the user is calling the Get News Articles API, we are getting the subscription or the news that we want to show the user, and or I guess a list of news that the user will see in the news feed.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes and no. So for the RSS feed to reference directly to the blog, right? The database and the S3 are connected to each other. For example, every the response for the Get News article, I'm looking at the first API. The database will have the news article ID and the media content. The media content could be a reference to the S3 service.
Mm-hmm.
So there is no way that the RSS service could directly talk to storage because it doesn't have a reference to, hey, what does this media content, what ID does this belong to, right? At that point. So yeah, I see that you removed the connection between RSS service and the storage. Yeah, that's the right way. All right. So could you tell me a little bit more about what kind of metrics do you think would be super useful for someone from SRE to understand when something is going wrong here? And at what points would you text?
So we are aiming for a highly available system, and also a good user experience. So the latency on the user side should be like minimal. So keeping these two in mind, availability wise, we definitely want to monitor the service of our health. And by this I mean like the health of our service, sorry, not the service of our health, the health of our RSS feed service. So here we are, looking for the uptime of the service, all the uptime of the service, the host level metrics like CPU usage, memory usage, IO usage, those metrics. And then between the okay, let me cover availability first. And then between the service and the database, we want to measure the like the latency between the service and the database. Like if over time we are seeing that the queries are taking longer to get from the database, and that's like something that we want to address using like the database sharding options that we discussed. Similarly, like between the database and the cache itself, like we also want to monitor the performance of the cache. Like if the cache is so let's say if it's the cache is storing returning the results in the time that we expect it to, like I'm assuming there is like some benchmarking that we will be doing, and then making sure that the cache is kind of following that benchmarking and returning request to the service feed. For the storage itself, we want to monitor like how like how much we are utilizing the storage. If we are going to reach like 90% or 85% limit within the storage, we should think of like storage expansion or maybe compression of the images to kind of like make more storage space. Then yeah, I think availability wise, this is what I'm thinking we can, and this is what, and the load balancers also, like, yeah, we also like make sure that the load balancers are healthy, and the load balancers will also do health checks on the speed service as well. Whereas I'm thinking like latency wise, we want to monitor when the client is making API calls. We want to monitor like the mean time to response is, are the users experiencing latency in that, and then we want to the news feed itself, like how fast are we generating the news, or how fast the news feed is getting updated. That is like some client-side metrics that we can collect and then like send it back to the service so that we can analyze that and improve the client application itself. And then so I'm thinking.
Basically, you already mentioned about the disaster recovery aspect, right? You already mentioned that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's all I had.
Okay, that sounds good. I think you covered quite a bit today in the interview. I can provide you some feedback right now, and then I can feedback as well.
Yeah, sure.
So I think this time you were, I think you got the flow of how the interview should be. So you were able to like quickly ask, questions about what exactly is needing to be built. And then you were good at taking the hints that the interviewer was sharing with you. And you were able to steer yourself in the direction that, is required. And you were able to go through the flow quite well. The improvements that I could see is that you could describe a little bit more about the entity relationship, right, between how these different databases are actually correlated. It doesn't have to be pretty elaborate, but just like maybe adding an example of, hey, we will have an article database. We'll have because spoke a lot about the availability of the database, but we did not really speak about what the database should actually contain and how the different connected with each other. So it would be good to address that. And also, you did a good job with the diagram where you shared about the client tab, the load balancers, and I think caching is something which you can read a little bit more about because there are different kinds of caching. So what you described right now is cache aside, where we are doing simultaneous reads and writes to like the cache and the database. But yeah, I think just understanding where all the cache could be placed would be super helpful in here. And for the database, those MySQL. So for the MySQL database works when it is like log application and all of that, but typically in applications like Instagram or Airbnb, Cassandra is usually the choice of database that's used. When I was looking at like how Airbnb stores its things, Cassandra is the most popular choice. So you can read a little bit why Cassandra and how is it better than MySQL for this particular thing. Like I think the same question be correlated with Airbnb, you know, such that like they also have, right? You choose a location and choose that I want only a house and whatever filters that you put, and then you see all those different homes available. And as people are booking the homes, the news feed, that feed gets refreshed, right? So you can correlate it with similar to that. And what else? You did really well with the SRE topics. I think your day-to-day job, it probably makes you exercise that aspect quite a bit. So you did a good job in capturing high availability, latency, performance, the throughput, and resource utilization. I think one thing that I was looking for is how will you calculate the thresholds, right? And how will you add things? That could be a nice to have to address because that's a very important part of your job, right?
Sorry, what was the second thing you said? How to calculate threshold and?
Yeah. So how would you ensure what is the threshold, right? If say some numbers, like you did say some numbers such that if the if the page doesn't load within 2 seconds, then we will add a threshold over there and then we will alert, right? So that alerting piece was something that I was looking for. That would have been very useful to add.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you did quite well, but I would focus on a few of these things. Yeah, and just I think the interviewer is there to help you. So just be very keenly listening to the hints that they're providing because they want to have a discussion with you. So if you could lead some of the topics without asking questions to me. For example, when it came to the final, like when I asked you about how you keep it available and all of that, you led that whole conversation, right? I wasn't interfering in that. So if you could bring that to the rest of the interview without asking, clarifying questions. You ask clarifying questions at the beginning, but not at every, right? For example, while you were drawing this block diagram, you could have led a little bit more instead of, looking for affirmation from my side.
Okay.
So just like for the SRE topics, you led the complete discussion. You took it everywhere, right? So I would assume that for senior, that's what they would be expecting at different stages.
Okay. So just to be clear then, so you asked me questions about the database, what would happen if the app is trying to write to the database and it fails. So are you saying that I should cover or talk about database replication and all that stuff while I am, or as I'm designing the high level design?
No, I think that you can speak about when asked, just like you did today.
Okay.
So I think it can get it can get very overwhelming for the interviewer also, if you're providing a lot of information up front. So
Okay.
the way you spoke and drew out the diagram was a good pace. So
Okay.
you can keep. But also one thing that you could add is that between the RSS feed service and database, you can have like a pub sub, publisher subscriber, something like that, right? Which stores in queue, which stores all the requests. So in case something goes, you'll know exactly where the user left off, so then you can retry, right? So
Okay.
but
So sorry, just to follow up on your point where you said that for a senior, I should have led more of the conversation. Is there like an example you can give about that where I didn't meet the mark?
Yeah. So let's toggle back to the plain text, right? I think you did quite. It's a block diagram. You were leading the way. I think except for the caching part, which I think you got the hang of it once I was hinting you in that direction. You got that. But besides that, you led the way. So for example, I think in the API design aspect of it, I think I was providing a lot more hints in that aspect, right? For example, the first thing that the person does is login, right? So the login should, you could have explained it in such a way that, okay, the first API that we will have is the user login, right? So this will the user ID and password or phone number. And then the response of this could just be Boolean. And then the second thing would be they select the news, right? And then the third step would be once they select the news, they will get the news articles, right? So just the flow of how that API flows through, and then in that way.
Okay, makes sense. Yeah. Okay. And I think overall, I probably went slower than I should have. Is there like did you think that there was like one area I should have spent less time and like maybe moved on to the next topic or the next point?
Yeah, so I think like while you're clarifying questions, right? I think if you were to time box that, I think of all the different sections, I think you spent the most time in collecting the functional, non-functional requirements and questions at the beginning, because as you saw, even like while we progressed, there were questions, like we kept discussing. You were able to get out your clarifying questions out of the way while getting to the next steps, especially the block diagram. I think it unblocked a lot of requirements right there. So I think time box to maybe like time box itself like 3 minutes if possible, because usually we always go over time in the interview. So while practicing, if you can time box the clarifying questions to 3 minutes, and then assuming that in the actual interview it will go to 5 minutes or so, that would be good, because the main focus you want to do, you want to have is on your specialty, which is getting to the data quickly and getting to answering questions quickly, because you want to steer the interviewer to your most strongest point. And your strongest point from what I observed today was the I think the points flowed to you effortlessly when you spoke about high availability, latency, and everything. that you sounded very confident. So you want to like steer the interviewer to that direction quicker, so you have more time to spend in that.
Okay. Makes sense. Yeah, I think this was a good session, and I really appreciate your feedback. That is really helpful, and I'll keep that in mind and keep practicing.
Yeah, and I'll put this feedback in writing as well, so that you can reference it back, and then you can, for the next interview, go ahead and add those. Even even practice it yourself a few times.
Yeah, I'll do that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, most welcome. Good luck for your interview.
Thank you so much. Yeah, have a good night.
You too. Bye.